Is Resident Evil 0 a game that is worth your time, or is it a game that shouldn't even be touched? In this video, I aim to answer that question by giving you my personal thoughts and experiences with the game. So with that being said, let's get right into it. Resident Evil 0 acts as a prequel to the first Resident Evil and tells the story of the Bravo team's experiences during the beginning of the outbreak. You take on the role of the medic Rebecca Chambers and start the game by exploring a train infested with zombies and leeches. During exploration of the train, Rebecca stumbles upon the secondary protagonist of the game, a prisoner escapee named Billy Cohen. The two continue to explore when the once immobile train begins to move and pick up speed at an alarming rate. The pair eventually must stop the train, which causes them to go off course and drive right into a secret Umbrella training facility. From there, the pair continues to investigate this area and uncover the many secrets behind Umbrella. So overall, the story was pretty decent, but there definitely was a couple of flaws that need mentioning. The training facility has settings very identical to Resident Evil 1. For instance, right when Rebecca and Billy enter the facility, they traverse through a very short sewers area, climb up a ladder, and then find themselves in a mansion that has a lot of similarities to the Spencer Mansion in RE1. The central area is pretty much the same, both have narrow halls, and both have outdoor balconies. Not only that, but further into the training facility, you will reach other areas that compare quite well to RE1. This is really quite a shame because the other three games in the original trilogy were very unique as far as settings go. Another minor issue I had was in regards to Billy. For playing a significant role in the game, it's quite surprising that his backstory wasn't really talked about in the game. He went along and aided Rebecca throughout the entire game, and all we got was a small 30-second clip of his past that really didn't show that much. Aside from that, nothing else was revealed about him, making it somewhat unclear on what Billy is all about. Lastly, I feel like I have to bring up the main villain of the game. In Resident Evil games, the main antagonists always have a huge role and are very impactful to the story, whether that being constantly pursuing you, constantly tormenting you, or constantly helping you. The main villain in RE0 didn't do any of this. He kinda stayed tucked away in the shadows and watched Billy and Rebecca from afar, but never bothered to engage them until much further into the game, and at that point, it was far too late. He never really had that prominent role that main antagonists are supposed to have, which is honestly quite a shame. Now, aside from these few issues I just mentioned, the overall story is actually pretty decent, and it really helps us better understand the origins of the virus that burned Raccoon City to the ground. I'm not going to sit here and say that it was one of the better stories in the RE series, but I definitely would not consider it as one of the worst. Resident Evil 0 brought back many of the fan-favorite mechanics we all know and love, like the pre-rendered backgrounds, fixed camera angles, and tank controls. The game also looks visually great, with its incorporation of textured backgrounds and CGI cutscenes. Aside from the common gameplay mechanics we would expect, there were a few couple brand new features included. Since the game features two protagonists, Capcom wanted a way for the player to take control of both, so they incorporated something known as the partner system. This system allows you to switch between characters with just a click of a button. With this system comes a few extra commands. The first one being the attack/idle option, which basically controls if you want the player you are not controlling to fire at the enemy. The other mechanic to this system is solo/team, which allows Rebecca and Billy to stay together or break apart and traverse the area on their own. This makes it much easier to explore since you are covering two areas of ground at once. Now, the game actually does force you to break apart every once in a while to solve certain puzzles or to progress further in the game, which actually works out very well. It's a team system. Both characters have to play their own part in progressing through the story, as the two of them possess different traits. Rebecca has the ability to mix herbs with her mix kit, and also uses the kit to create certain mixes that are actually used for a few puzzles in the game. Billy, on the other hand, has higher HP than Rebecca, and is much stronger, which allows him to push certain objects in the game to solve puzzles. This works really well because it gives both characters a sort of purpose. In your playthrough, Rebecca will act as the medic and carry the health items, while Billy will be the character up front and doing most of the attacking. The two work very well as a team by playing their own unique roles, and that's what makes the separation sequences great because it really adds that intensity to the game. Now, going back to the partner system, I do want to mention that there seemed to be a few times throughout my playthrough where the character I was controlling switched to the opposite trait, or I just completely forgot to switch traits with them, which really screwed me over in some situations. There would be a few times where I went to open the door, and when I entered the next room, the other character would not follow me. Sometimes there would be enemies in these rooms and my other character decided to stay, so they would end up taking damage damage or straight up die before I had the chance to react. There would also be times where the other character seemed to randomly switch to attack mode and just start wasting my shotgun or grenade launcher ammo that I was desperately trying to conserve. So with that being said, it is very important in this game to always make sure you have your character set with the right mechanic you want them on. Overall, I would say this new partner mechanic worked very well. It was something new and fresh, something we have never previously experienced in a Resident Evil game. Because of that, the partner system really allows the game to stand out from the others. But unfortunately, with this new mechanic, there was something very big that Capcom decided to leave out of the game, being the item box. Instead, there was a new drop mechanic implemented, where you can just drop any items you want to hold others. But the huge flaw in this is the fact that you have to come back for every item you dropped. Now I'm going to be honest, this is easily one of the worst parts of the game because it led to so much backtracking. So basically what ends up happening is the player dumps all of their items in the main central area of the mansion, and you just have to go there when you need something. The main hall basically ends up being just one big item box, which is absolutely terrible. There were a few times specifically in my playthrough where I was in a completely different area in the game, far away from the main hall, and I didn't bring a certain item with me, or I ran out of a certain item. So I would have to backtrack all the way to the main hall to grab said item. To make it even worse, both Billy and Rebecca only have 6 slots, and shotgun and grenade launchers both count for 2 slots, 4 total. I really don't know why they took this approach, because when we look back on Resident Evil 1, Jill actually had 8 inventory slots, and the shotgun only took up 1 slot. I get that the plan was to try something new here, but unfortunately, it did not work at all, and made the game much more tedious than it had to be. It is easily one of, if not the biggest flaws of the game. The player progression and puzzles, as we know, have always played a big part in Resident Evil games. Some games can include extremely difficult puzzles, while others make them too easy. In Resident Evil 0, I am happy to say that Capcom found that sweet spot in the middle. The game progression can somewhat be confusing at times, but overall you were able to catch on pretty quick on what you need to progress further into the game. The same thing can be said for the puzzles. Most of them took a few tries to figure out, but they were never over the top to where you'd have to sit there for hours trying to think of how to solve them. This aspect of Resident Evil 0, I must say, was implemented very well. Resident Evil 0 is known to being one of the hardest Resident Evil games, and after playing it, I can definitely see why. Firstly, I want to talk about the enemies in the game. Just like any other RE game, Resident Evil 0 has its fair share of exclusive enemies, the 2 most noticeable being the Eliminator and the Leech enemies. Both are extremely difficult to deal with. The Eliminators are basically mini versions of Hunters, but even faster in comparison. I remember there would be times where I had to walk into a room and didn't even have time to react to the Eliminator's attack. They would instantly lunge at you and basically leave you next to no time to get a shot off. They can also stun lock you pretty easily, which is never fun to endure. They are easily up there for one of the most annoying Resident Evil enemies, so try and avoid them if you can. The other enemy that can be difficult to deal with are the Leech enemies. They do have a weakness to fire, which the game does give you necessary tools for these enemies, like Molotovs and flame rounds for the grenade launcher. However, without these flames, the Leech enemies are nearly invincible. You have to shoot them so many times with traditional weapons before they go down. They also have this grab attack where they can extend their arms absurdly far and pretty much latch onto you, causing the player to take a ton of damage. So basically, if you are not prepared, you will most likely die to the leeches. Aside from the enemies, the game is very scarce when it comes to resources. I played through this game on normal difficulty, and there was actually a point in my playthrough where me and my chat thought it would be best if I reset the game, because I was just in such a bad spot. Both of my characters were in danger, I was out of health, and I was nearly out of ammo as well. Even though I explored the entire area, I was still just not able to manage around midway through the game. Luckily, after a few clutches, I was actually able to get back on my feet and clear the game. But let it be known that RE0 is one of those games that you really need to conserve your ammo and run past zombies when you can, because if not, it could potentially lead to resetting the game. When it comes to replayability, the game has quite a few cool features that are definitely worth checking out after completion. Once you beat the game, you unlock Wesker mode. In this game mode, you get to play as the fan favorite character Wesker in a brainwashed Rebecca Chambers. The highlight of this mode is the cool abilities Wesker can perform. His first ability is Death Stare, which has the ability to explode the head of any zombie that is in your way. He also has Shadow Dash, which is a move that allows Wesker to travel at an incredible rate of speed. Aside from this, there is also an unlockable game mode called Leech Hunter mode. In this mode, you have to find and collect leeches throughout your playthrough. If you find enough leeches, you have the opportunity to unlock unlimited ammo and new weapons to try out. Resident Evil games typically have good replayability, and I would say Resident Evil 0 is no exception to this. Resident Evil 0 is nowhere near the best Resident Evil game. It tried adding in new mechanics that did work to an extent, but in exchange for these mechanics, certain things like no item box and less inventory was implemented, which just led to an overall terrible inventory management system in the game. This made Resident Evil 0 a lot more tedious than it had to be. However, even with the game's many flaws, I will say that I had a great time playing this game. It plays just like the original games, and keeps that iconic survival horror aspect we all know and love, with the pre-rendered backgrounds, fixed camera angles, and tank controls. So with that being said, if you can look past the flaws that RE0 had and enjoy the game for what it is, then I would highly recommend giving the game a shot. Make sure to check out this video here covering 30 things you never knew about Resident Evil 4.